Okay, well, let's see. You mentioned the barber school days. That was one thing. That was tied in a little bit with the coffee house scene and Cwik group and all those guys when they were running through Denver.
But you have to talk about,
But
because
that's just a brief thing. But there was this boarding house I was staying at in Denver. And it was really an interesting place because there was a couple of professors lived there for University of the Colorado Extension School. There were several surveyors that lived there that were going out to deer trail in that area to survey for missile sites. Because back then they honeycombed the Front Range with missiles.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes, all the way to Cheyenne, in fact.
The big silos or something else?
They were the big ones. So if you take right where Rocky Mountain Arsenal is, or the bombing range at Lowry, you go to Deer Trail and out that whole thing almost to Kansas, there's missiles. And Kansas has got some missiles. You go up north and there's missile silos in the grasslands area.
Those have been deactivated as of...
Well, they've all been deactivated.
Yeah.
But they've been all run out of Cheyenne Springs and Cheyenne Mountain.
Okay.
Because the missile command then got based in, I think, Colorado Springs.
Okay.
But you see all those, I'm recording here, you see those things and they're at Buckley Field, all those little ball things when you fly in, that's all part of that.
Okay.
And then they had the distant early warning dew line that was across North Dakota, Montana. If we had attacks from the north, so in other words, if the Russian missiles went over the poles, we'd get warned from all of those sites.
Okay.
And then you had places like Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, or I guess South Dakota, North Dakota.
Don't they still have them up there?
Yeah, they got them. Yeah. But they harbor B-1 bombers and things like that. But they still have some missile silos around. And they had trouble with the disciplines of it. And, in a way, I'm thinking of children, and I have a notion our president is much like a child. And I can remember a child getting a new toy. And you can tell the child, don't play with that or you'll break it that way. Don't do this, leave it alone, just it's to look at. And pretty soon the child might put it in his mouth and bite his neck off or something like that. And imagine, a lot of immature people think, why have a toy if you can't play with it? Now put that guy on the trigger of a nuclear weapon. And he already did that with his little Tomahawk missile escapade that he launched missiles on. And that was never done by a president before. And he told his general, let's launch 50 Tomahawk missiles at that base in Iraq and see what happens. Did that while serving chocolate cake to the Chinese ambassador. Now, it may have been to prove a point, it may have been several other things, but that's not the way diplomacy works in this country. It's the way it works in Imperial England and France, etc., if you're working under a king. But I think that people coming to this country had enough of kings and fighting with kings and shit like that. That's why they set it up where we didn't have a king. And in fact, they got tired of nobility lording it over people, where they said we couldn't even confer any titles of nobility here in our Constitution. So Trump looks at the Constitution as an encumbrance, like most business people do. Well, they want efficiency, they don't want to pay a lot of taxes, because a lot of the taxes goes to accountability issues, and why should they have to answer to us anyway? Or we answer to them, I mean. So accountability is expensive. And a lot of sole proprietors don't understand that. In fact, a lot of family businesses, it's hard to get the patriarch out of the business when he gets to a certain old age. How do you retire him? And that's one of the characteristics of these small companies too. And Trump had a real small company, but he treats it like it was a big conglomerate. And it wasn't a conglomerate. It wasn't really a business at all. What he really was doing was administering an estate.
How's that?
He had got this inheritance, and he was investing it.
Not very well.
No, I mean, he was a screw-up, but that didn't matter. There was a lot of people, families that were that way. Many a family fortune was blown right here in Boulder.
Well, this is true.
So, you got him sitting there, and he's got this surrealistic view of the way government operates, what a president does, and because he's never studied the position. And, you can maybe compare it to a conductor of an orchestra. The conductor kind of leads, and he clues the bassoonist when to start playing, and the horn player and the violins. But he can't just fire the horn player or the bassoonist because he doesn't like them. Or if the concert master doesn't bow down to him when he should, get a different concert master. He's up there to lead an orchestra, not just a bunch of little individual musicians. And the individual musicians all have to work together, otherwise it's not an orchestra, it's chaos. And he's the shits as a conductor.
So how about go back to being a sole owner of a company and those type of powers, and how he's using his thinking seems to be on the vein of feudalism.
Oh, it is very much. He thinks he was elected, put in office to run things. He was put in office to be a CEO and to get people around him that can run things in tune with the way his ideology or his supporters' ideology is, not just his own. So he can put some of his buddies in there, and if the buddies have any idea of what the government is and what they should do, they're immediately going to clash with them. His whole thing is, I can show you bastards how to run a government, how to run it smoothly, and at half the money. So he's chopping here, there, and everywhere where he thinks the money isn't necessary. And then he doesn't report to the citizenry what he's doing because there isn't money to do that. And it's like in a poker game where you say, shut up and deal. And that's kind of what he's doing. He wants everybody, here's what we've come forward to, or we brought forward, and vote on it, and give me a rubber stamp. Now the other problem is he delegates. So he just says, I'm hiring these people to be my minions, and they have to do what I want. So therefore, since they don't do what I want, I can fire them.
Because they're not loyal?
Exactly. This whole loyalty thing, it's interesting because every person takes an oath. When I was a judge, I had to take an oath to uphold the Constitution, et cetera, and I know every federal employee has to do so also. So how do you take an oath saying you're going to support the government and the Constitution of the United States? What do you do when the president orders you to do something unconstitutional? An unlawful order. Well, the Dreyfus case took care of that, where an officer refused to obey an order that he thought was illegal. And this is actually why we tried all the people at Nuremberg that we did, because they said they were just following orders. and maybe they were. But if I'm a tyrant and I tell you to go out and kill 1 million people and you do it, why didn't you say that's insane? Or why did you say I'm not going to do it? Instead, they got on board and did it. And this is one of the things I've been trying to figure out for ages and ages and ages, why that happened. And watching Trump operate, I can see a little bit why it is, because these people feel like they don't have any choice. I was listening on the radio the other day where a person was talking about the Rust Belt people, what they call the Rust Belt. And he said, well, it's like if there's a big concert coming to town and you stand in line from midnight on to have a good ticket for the concert the next morning or the next evening at 9 o'clock. So you're maybe 100th in line. All of a sudden, this group walks in front of you because they're determined to be special people. Then another group walks in front of you and they get to get ahead of the line, and they've never been anything, they've never stood in the line, but they're getting ahead of you. And that's the way the rednecks view minorities. They've waited for generations, they've waited patiently, they've done their schoolwork, they did their homework, they cooperated with the police, they went to church every Sunday, and then you got a bunch of minorities coming and saying, we want equality now. We don't want to stand in any line. So the citizenry there are getting really resentful of the fact that other people are getting preferential treatment that they don't think they deserve. Now this is reflected in a lot of the attitudes, like welfare policy. Right now these people are convinced, I worked hard to get my paycheck to raise my family, buy my house, etc. And you have some people that don't have to work and they're getting money to live on. Why is that? Why should they not have to work? Why should they not have to do this out of to support their family? And it's probably about a good question. And the politicians aren't responding to it, nor is the church responding to it.
So they thought Trump will?
No, they thought Trump understands that, and he's going to stop that shit. So if you got to give 20 preferential spots to blacks and other minorities and women, and they haven't been in the workforce for 20 decades or centuries, and you've been waiting in line all this time, 3 generations, and all of a sudden somebody gets put in ahead of you, you're going to be a little bit resentful. And that's why some of these lawsuits, like in Michigan back in the 70s, happened. Because it was discriminatory. And the white majority thought it was discriminatory. And it probably was, but it was a matter of redistribution.
Explain that better, or more. Which lawsuit specifically?
Well, there was the Michigan case on admittance of black students and things like that, whether they lowered the requirements and some of the black recruitment stuff. They claimed it was discriminatory, which it may or may not have been, but it was to build up minority recruitment. So statistically, they wanted to have in universities a population equal to the population of the country. University, they wanted to equal women half and half in all the professions, things like that. So if you worked hard and was valedictorian and you were a white guy, and this black guy from the ghetto took your scholarship away because we want to promote the inequality, to bring up the inequality, to pay atonement for it. Well, that's good as far as society is concerned in some ways. But what about the poor little white kid that got screwed out of a scholarship?
So why did they vote for Trump? I mean, I understand the resentment, but it doesn't explain because most of his policies are against their best interests.
Well, that's what Brown wrote about in his book, What's the Matter with Kansas? Are people voting against their own interests? And partially, Brown explained it as a culture war. And look what's going on in this election. You have the transgender thing. And there are a lot of white males are very upset about that. They're upset about the gay rights thing. And they're upset about a lot of the gays proselytizing. The Rainbow March and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with a lot of that, with some of the rights movements, say, of gay rights and all this kind of stuff, is there's a lot of people who think that it's great to be for equality and things like that, but they don't want to have people out there proselytizing. And some of the activists gender activists are worse than the fundamentalist Christians. They don't want equality, they don't want this, that, and the other. They want the proselytize, they want acceptance, they want you to endorse their stance.
What about Trump and his last move about getting the gays out of the military?
I think that was a ploy to help take the ultra-conservative wing of the Republican Party to keep them voting the right way on the health bill.
So he probably wasn't too serious about it?
No. He didn't confer anybody, he just tweeted it. I would hope he isn't serious because all the generals are against him. The other problem is what he's doing with the State Department. So Russia, there's a real big war going on I've never seen. Like right now, the Congress is asking for sanctions against Russia. And they're doing it deliberately in light of what happened with Trump and Russia and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're calling Trump's bluff.
Right.
And Moscow, supporting Trump, evicted a few U.S. ambassadors and confiscated some property. So there's this little diplomatic war going on that's been going on for quite a while. Only the Cold War has turned a little bit hotter than what it was.
What about the budget regarding this point of diplomacy versus war?
Well, you have the propaganda thing there, like the $1,000 toilet seat. And that gets publicized in the paper. Why would the Pentagon pay that much for a toilet seat? Well, they disguised a lot of intelligence activities that they didn't want the Russians to know about or whatever. And of course it looked bad. Nobody would spend that much for a toilet seat. But if you throw in a reconnaissance camera on a U-2, then it makes a little sense. But the Pentagon isn't going to say that. So some of these guys attack the Pentagon for their budget after another agency asks them to put their stuff in the budget for them. So they're like trustees. And people who don't understand government don't understand that, and they think, well, this isn't efficient. We got to stop this waste. And that was one reason that proprietary companies by intelligence agencies took a rise, because it was another way of raising money.
Well, you're saying that the new budget was not supporting the State Department, but this is important because this is war versus peace.
Well, no. You and I think that way.
Mm-hmm.
The other people think it's the Broncos versus the Raiders. Seriously, it's just like a sporting event. And we got to win. We should win this game. And what Trump's doing is pep rallies. You look at the convention. The locker up shouting and things like that. Make America Great. That's, all I expected to see was cheerleader costume on him, and the image would have been complete, because that's what he was doing. He was cheerleading for his game. And here's the rules I want to make in the game. Here's the way I want to play it. And you guys support me and we'll do it that way. Congress has been saying for decades they don't like Obamacare. And Obamacare was crafted by both parties, and there were compromises made to get things through Congress that a lot of the Democrats didn't like. A lot of Republicans didn't like, but it was the way the insurance worked. So now, after they made the deal, they want to renege. And they can't do it because it's already in place and a lot of people like it. So they were arguing all this time, we got to replace Obamacare. It's not good. We got to do this, that, and the other. But nobody asked them how you're going to do it. So they were exploiting all this naysaying thing. And what Trump's doing is equivalent of running a football game by taking out his linemen.
Explain that more.
Well, you need the whole front line in order to make scores and things like that. And particularly to protect your quarterback. Now, if you don't have your linemen or you don't treat your linemen well, somebody might get through sometime and give you a little bit of a jolt. Lose yards and things like this. So they're looking at things. One of the best examples was the second Rambo movie. The colonel goes to recruit Rambo after he decimates that town at one time. And I think he's tasked to remove a few prisoners. In Vietnam, it's been so long I can't remember the plot line. But there was one line in there that Stallone looked at his colonel and he said, "Can we win this time?" It was all about winning. And there's a lot of America is frustrated because we didn't win the Vietnam War. And we never intended to win in the first place. What we were doing was just screwing up the Chinese advancement and influence, things like that. So we were just stalling for time so we could get our own people in there, get some of the rubber and other stuff taken over, and keep the Chinese out. And we did that. Now, Afghanistan, it just came out in, I think, the New York Times yesterday or the day before. There's a whole bunch of minerals there for the first time. And the multinationals want to be able to mine it, as do the Chinese. We're going to be fighting there until somebody decides who's going to be able to exploit the minerals.
Wouldn't Russia be in first place on that one?
No, they got kicked out.
I know.
China's in there bidding on concessions. So that's the only reason we're there now. I'm halfway convinced that's why we're in Iraq, to get our hands on some oil concessions.
We don't really need them anymore.
Well, we might not need them, but we don't want other people to have them. Right?
It's pretty twisted.
No, it's geopolitics. So I've always thought for years that the whole name of the energy game was we use up everybody else's energy first, and the last man standing with energy is the winner of the game. And unfortunately, they view everything as a game. And we've done half an hour here.